Okay. All right. We got it. We got it. All right. Okay. All right. We got it. We got it. All right. All right. One more minute. I'm going to try and post this um,
Nice.
in the chat and see if I can let people know. Mhm. And I don't know if you can, I don't know if you can see um, online. If you can see, uh, you may not be able to see the YouTube.
Not from here. No.
Okay.
Let's see if I can find it.
All right, there it goes. That's done. All right, we'll see if anyone joins us.
Cool.
Right, but in any case, so I'll record this here. All right, all right. So after, God, how long has it been, Billy? What, 6, 7 months now? Close to
Oh.
it?
Pretty close.
Pretty close. Almost an entire season. We started with a whole entire plan to be with you for much of the year, but unfortunately, life happens. This is not my main job, so life, other commitments, more commitments came into play. Regardless of all that, this is the time. This is the time to be back. This is the Reds Disciples podcast. The Reds Disciples podcast is a podcast for a online Facebook community of Celtics-based Celtics fans and Celtics-based discussion and analysis. And once again, we are happy to be back, happy to be recording again after long last. Again, I am Aaron, and as with me as always, returning as well, is my pal Billy. Billy, how you doing?
I'm doing well. As one of the great poets of our generation said, don't call it a comeback.
Right? Been here for years.
Exactly.
That's right. Right. Beautiful, beautiful. So with that in mind, I think obviously the most important thing, we are going to the fucking finals, baby. We are going to the finals, right? After 10 years, 10 long years away, right? It's been so long, but it's never looked so good. And so improbable this year. Like it just, the last time we recorded, things were not looking good for this team, were they?
They were awful. We didn't fall to 11th place yet, which was at our lowest, but we were coming up on that. Our last podcast was right before the main part, like the main chunk of the West Coast trip. That's Lakers, Clippers, Suns, and Celtics basketball in December. I don't have to tell you how those 3 games went, but I was there personally, and I've never had an experience so bad to just watch loss after loss after loss.
Oh, tell me about it. Yeah. And obviously, so many games where this team had, built out to leads, 17, 20, however many, and would just shoot themselves in the foot over and over and over again with just bad defense, offense that was predictable, lacked movement, lacked adaptability. I mean, there were times, honestly, going back then where, and I never called for him to be fired or anything like that, because that's stupid. No one's gonna fire a guy in their first year. But I actively was wondering, like, does this guy Ime Udoka know what he's doing with this team? Because this doesn't, right now, these comments don't sound like he does. But obviously something clicked in January and he figured it out, and he and this group righted the ship. It's wild. To be where we are now after how we started and where we were when this podcast last left is just one of the just most mind-blowing things I've ever heard.
It's improbable. It's absolutely improbable to go from 18-21 to 4 games away from banner 18. Like, just think about that for a second. Going from an 11 seed to we're top of the mountain right now. There's only 2 teams left, and we're one of the 2.
Right? That's crazy. I remember at the beginning of the year, like I had thought, my prediction for this team was about 52, 53 wins, which I thought at that time might be good enough for third seed. I figured Milwaukee and Miami would be better than us. And so I was actually close. I was pretty close. We ended up with 51, which actually ended up being good enough for the 2 seed. And because obviously with what we know happened, Milwaukee kind of tanking that last game or 2 so that they could play Chicago, and us saying, no, we're not ducking nobody. We ain't running from nobody. This ain't a track team, as Ime's famous quote now, which will now live in Celtics folklore. We chose the most difficult road to get to where we are. Even considering all the way back from starting 18 and 21, we chose the most difficult path to get to being where we are, one of the last two teams in the season, and now we're in the finals. So it's just crazy to be where we are. And I think, do you think of and I know we've all done this before, but since we're just coming back and we haven't really chopped this up, would you say is maybe the New York game, is that one of the few games where we start to notice like that was the low point and then things kind of changed? Was that like, well, it can't get any worse? That game where RJ Barrett hit the 3 at the buzzer and then we're just like, oh, F this.
See, a lot of people point to the Knicks game as the rock bottom or like the turning point, but we played good basketball for like 75% of that game. I think the flip was already turned by then. It's just we had to get out some of the kinks. I'm not alone on this. I'll give credit to the Riffs man on Twitter. He's been saying it the whole time. When the energy actually shifted, it was a month before even Jalen tweeted it, because Jalen's tweet was like at the end of January. It was December 22nd. Do you know what we did on December 22nd?
I don't remember.
Like I said, it's just a random thing, but I really do think it really focused Jalen and Jason specifically. We signed Joe Johnson to a 10-day contract, and the vibes just totally changed.
Oh, I think they love Joe. They love Joe having Joe in here.
Just somebody for them to talk to, somebody for them to that's kind of been there, but kind of not. And it seemed like he kind of put the focus in, like, you guys realize you're blowing this perfect opportunity for you to do something really special. And if you don't get your crap together, they're going to break you guys up. And I think Jalen, being from Atlanta, he really did look up to Joe even more than Tatum did. But I think Tatum did too, just because Joe's one of those guys around the league that like everybody seems to like.
I was so surprised Joe didn't stick, actually. Like, just from a veteran wing standpoint guy, a scorer that these guys could connect with. I was actually a little surprised that he didn't stick. I mean, maybe it's just he just couldn't play that kind of defense necessary, or we didn't think we'd need him. But no, that's such a great thing to point out and pick up, how him coming in had changed the energy of the team, and how he had begun to call the team out. This was around the time where a lot of guys were starting to get called out. Ime calling him out, Marcus calling the Jays out, and Joe Johnson's calling the Jays out. Like, it's big things. And also, this is the time where people are starting to openly wonder, like, can these two guys, can they play together? Is this something that's workable?
Well, if we go back to our off-season pod, which feels like a million years ago, we had basically three. Will Tatum make a leap? Can the Jays play together? And is Smart as starting?
Right.
Those were the three questions.
Yeah.
And we've answered them. I mean, Smart's the starting point guard in the NBA Finals. You know how insane that sentence is if you told me that a year ago?
Right. I had hoped, because, I mean, I really did believe that Marcus deserved a shot. We all know this year coming in, as you laid out, as you greatly laid out those questions we had at the beginning. This was supposed to be a research year. I don't want to say bridge year, but this was supposed to be a year where we were supposed to figure out a lot of stuff about what this team is. New leadership, some new players coming in. We're supposed to figure out, like, all right, with these new guys, let's assess where we are. Let's assess where we are, what this team's record is, figure out, we get to the playoffs. We hope we're going to get to the playoffs. We expect we will, but you don't know what's going to happen there. But either way, we're going to figure out where we are. And then after that, we can assess and say, all right, we got to hear these, who works well with this team, who doesn't. Grant had been coming off a subpar year after a pretty good rookie year. So like, I don't know if Grant's that great. We just got Al back. We'd hoped Al would be good, but you never know. If he still had anything, the questions were, what did he have left? Marcus, obviously, can Marcus run this team? Like my hope was that he could, because we had seen it in small glimpses and bits and pieces in the past when he stepped in for, our previously injured point guards, whether it be Kyrie or Kemba. And I always thought he had played well. And just the idea of him as a big point guard, which is what we drafted him to be. He drafted him as a point guard, to be a big guard, the tip of the spear, a guard who could post up, make plays out of the mid post, or, be that point of attack on defense. And, he can make some passes. We just hope that there would be enough offense, that he'd shoot okay enough that we could say, all right, we can figure things out with him at point guard. But he shot past all my expectations. Like, he really did. And it kind of snuck up on me in the second half, where like, all right, anyone notice that Marcus Smart is like hitting a lot more shots, or is that just me? And it just snuck up on you, and he called those guys out, and all of a sudden something clicked. Guys, accept him as the point guard, and he starts making plays for guys. He starts getting downhill. Guys start passing the ball. We start getting Celtics porn every night on Sports Center, like with just ball movement, guys moving here and there. It's just like beautiful, just beautiful. And you're like, oh my God, this is what we were looking for the whole first half of the year. Like, I remember we were like, is this switching strategy? Is this really work? I don't know if this is working, because we kept having guys get switched into bad matchups. And a lot of that was because we'd have a small backcourt with Schroeder and, whether it was Juancho Hernan-Gomez or Enes Kanter or some of these guys, they get switches, and the switches would just break down the team, just break down the D. And so we're like, I don't know if these switches work, but Ime stuck with it, and what he asked Brad to do was, no, just give me a few different players, or let me shorten my rotation, get a few of these guys out. The switching thing, if we stay with it, it'll work. We just got to use the right guys. And there you go.
No, it became a historic defense. He was right. He just didn't have the personnel at first. You can't run it with a Cantor, a Schroeder. I mean, even a Richardson, who was, for the most part, pretty good. He just didn't quite have it to where Derek White can actually be a real primary ball handler. I thought Richardson, that was my one big miss of the offseason. I thought he'd be really good in that backup ball handler role. And he had flashes here and there, but it never really clicked. And then also back on the Smart point, timing's everything, right? Like, if we asked him to do this 2-3 years ago, I don't think he was mentally or physically ready for what it would take. Like, I think he had to play with the Kembas, the Kyries, and kind of be like, okay, you're not going to be that kind of point guard. You need to be kind of like more of a, God, I mean, what do you even compare him to? A Drew Holiday? I mean, there really is no comparison. He's the defensive player of the year for a reason.
Yeah. And, the only loose comparisons you can make are maybe the Gary Payton ones. Not nearly the scorer Gary was at all, but Gary had that ability to make some plays from the post that we did see from time to time. We saw a lot of plays where Marcus is making passes from the elbows to backdoor cutters. We saw that quite a bit this year. And we even saw him coming off the screen and roll and getting downhill. I remember that was a big question too. Does this guy have enough burst to get to the lane? Can he use his size to leverage guys and get the shot he wants? Can he score enough? Can he be efficient enough scorer as a point guard to really run this team and keep his defender honest? Those were huge questions. But
Well,
it's
blasphemous. Like, I know it's blasphemy. The only thing I could kind of think of, because he couldn't shoot well either, was Dennis Johnson. I mean, is that what the mold he's kind of turning?
That's another good one. That's another good one. DJ. Yeah. Yeah. Like, I think he's going to be great going into next year. I hope to see, and let me see if I can pull up what his numbers were to finish the season. But, I think going into next year, my hope is that this team ends up falling along the lines of what Phoenix did this year. Like Phoenix, how Phoenix came on the year before to almost make the tournament, but they got really hot. No, excuse me. Phoenix made the finals, obviously, the year before. The year previous, they got hot, missed the playoffs. Next year, and they caught some breaks, but they made it to the finals. And then this year, obviously, they got the number one seed. They started the year like they're shot out of a cannon. Obviously, things fell for them, in the playoffs. But what we saw from the team, from Phoenix, to begin this year and going through most of this year, was a team that after the previous year's run to the finals, feels like, okay, we know who we are.
And that's what this feel like. They have an identity, and it's defense, a historic level defense.
Yeah. Yeah, and to be basically, I think if you ask most Celtics fans, their biggest goal for this roster, or I don't know, biggest goal, but one of the keys was just to be able to have a number of guys, 1 through 6, 1 through 7 guys that were generally switchable. Yep. So guys that you can put out in any number of spots, and if they had to switch, could still keep guys on the perimeter from getting in the lane and breaking things down. And they got a lot of that. And when they got Derek White for Richardson, who I admit, thinking at the time, I was a little bit surprised by that trade. Obviously, D. White got off to a little bit of slow start shooting, but you could clearly see his defense was going to translate, and his ability to guard, and especially, I think, get over screens and obviously come from the weak side and take some charges, was a big thing for this group. And it just added to the switchability of this group and making it feel like at times, we did have 6 or 7 guys on the court, for this defense.
Well, no, Derek White's become the new litmus test for like box score watchers.
Oh, yeah.
People who have games. Because if you actually watch the games and you see how he's pushing the ball compared to when we used to have Dennis just rolling the ball up the court every time, driving us crazy. We play at such a faster pace that even if he's not shooting well, because let's be honest, he's not a catch and shoot player. You can't just throw the ball to him open in the corner and think he's going to shoot. Everything he does has to be on the move and going towards the basket. Now, maybe he'll shoot. That would be great. That's a bonus. That's not, if you're judging him by field goal percentage, you're missing the freaking point. He's running the offense. If they go in, great. It's like what we used to do with Smart. It never mattered if Smart scored.
Yeah, no, you're right. And so I think you make a great point here, Billy, about him being the litmus test, because his shooting at times, is his number of wide open looks that he has missed. That's the visual thing. That's the thing that often jumps out. That's the easy thing you catch. And there's been some adjustment. It's sometimes it's hit or miss with offensive, with guys getting an offensive boost when they get traded. Sometimes that offensive, boost to your energy comes in when you get to a new team and you got a new role, and you catch fire right away. Other times, it's just a harder adjustment from that end. But the biggest thing I thought with him is I wanted to see him, at least on that end, on the offensive end, be a bit more aggressive. But I also thought, just like you said, he's not a guy who you can give the ball to and stand still and get the best out of him. He's got to be moving when he gets the ball, whether it be on cuts, whether it be on curls. He's got to be moving towards the basket to get his confidence. And him getting foul line jumpers, floaters in the paint, all that's his bread and butter. That's his money right there. And then after that, he can step out. But obviously what he does for this team is being able to push the ball and facilitate and make the extra pass, but is so important as a backup to what this team does. It allows them to be able to play Pritchard in his role because he can run the offense. And I think his ability as a defender who can chase over those screens and is long enough to bother shots and things like that off the bench just helps add to the length of this team and just makes it that much of a better defense. And like I said, and it does allow them to a degree and in bursts to be able to hide Pritchard even when people might pick on him.
And his shooting will always keep him on the floor too. That's the one thing with Pritchard. I mean, oh my God, the guy is a flamethrower. Once we got Dennis out of there and he was actually able to use his skill as a floor spacer, it just opened everything up. It was just a green light. And then now Pritchard is what, 7th, 8th in the whole league in 3-point percentage. Him and Grant, both in the top 10. Phenomenal.
Absolutely. And just to have the bench come up and be such a support for this team was just huge. And there are no Lou Williams or Jamal Crawfords or Jordan Clarksons on this team per se. No bucket getters, but what they do have off this bench are guys who know their role, who know how to fit in with the Jays and what they do. So it just, and they're versatile at both ends, with Grant becoming the shooter he was, with Derek, of course, as well. And then at times when necessary, when they made the trade to get Tice back, how huge was Tice going down the stretch? Low-key important move to have him there and what he was able to do, especially in the playoffs. And I think was it the Brooklyn series?
Brooklyn series. He was.
Yeah, just
because Rob was out. I mean,
Rob was out, right? And he was just so clutch. His knowledge of this team, just allowing him to just come back in and play his role.
Well, that was Brad's genius. He figured out the formula, and it wasn't a hard formula, but it was one that needed to be, you're going to do one of two things. If you could do both, you're going to play a lot. You either got to be able to shoot or you got to be able to defend. Now, if you do both, you're going to be in the rotation nonstop. If you can do one, then they're going to pick your spots like they do with Pritchard. But that's it. That's what you surround the Jays with, either a shooter or a defender, preferably somebody who does both.
Right. Exactly. And so, and with us going basically 8, whenever we're still waiting. And this was something that I was hoping we'd see by this point, but clearly it hasn't happened yet. And that is seeing what Aaron Neesmith could do. Aaron's been on the court, and when he's contributed, it just hasn't been the way we expected. It's been his defense that has shown up at times. In the playoffs in that game, he had 3 blocks. But his defense has come quicker than his offense has, which has been, and he contributes just enough defensively to make you feel like like, I can't give up on this kid, because if there's any chance that shooting comes around, like, whew, you got it. Like you got it. We also caught a little bit of Sam Hauser from time to time, who had some notable games down the stretch as well. Had a nice one in Milwaukee where he was a contributor early in the first half.
He's just a flame, man. He got one of the best strokes in the whole league. It's just
super high release, everything.
Yep.
Everything. So he was great. So we talked about, obviously, this team taking the most difficult road to get to where we are. There was a lot of talk just before the playoffs started of whether we should have tried to take an easier approach, to lose. In the end, it became difficult to do it anyway, because other guys just had better avenues to get the 3rd spot, like Milwaukee. But there was some talk before the playoffs started on whether or not, choosing to not duck teams. Obviously, the Brooklyn Nets and Kevin Durant and Kyrie was the best choice. What were your thoughts on this going into the playoffs? Where were you as far as this team's choice Ime's choice to just play?
Well, the basketball gods, they believe in karma. And if you duck a team because you want the easier matchup, something always seems to go wrong. Like, somebody might get hurt or ankle rolls, God forbid, something always seems to go wrong when you just don't do what you're supposed to do. And you kind of take away the integrity of the game, just throwing away a game so you can have a lower seed and have an easier first round, which made no sense to me, because was our goal to get out of the first round? The goal is not to get out of the first round. Honestly, having home court in that game 7 against Milwaukee was probably what got us the series if we don't have that. So,
Absolutely.
Like, really, you're going to sacrifice, have an easier first round? Not to mention that we ended up sweeping that first round series against the Nets, so it didn't even matter. Though I will say those were 4 for a sweep. That was the most competitive sweep I've ever seen.
Right. Yeah, it was. And what so impressed me on that team, like, that was the series, I feel like, and we've seen this in bits and pieces where the league has taken notice of Jason Tatum. But I think for a lot of people in the national scope, that was a series where they felt like, all right, Jason is arriving as a superstar here. Just the way he was able to just put his imprint on that entire series in every aspect, scoring, rebounding, passing, and, putting the cuffs on Kevin Durant, just putting him in jail basically the entire series, blocking a shot 2 or 3 times. It was a total team. It was a total team team job keeping him quiet, but the way Jason just rose to that challenge and just said, "No, I'm going to guard him, and I'm going to take him out. I'm going to take him down." Was unreal. Tatum, and people are surprised by it. Tatum was a leader in defensive win shares this year, which is somewhat of a team stat, but still, it just indicates that this team plays better defense when Tatum is on the floor. And we've seen elements of that in the past. He's a terrific team defender. But what we're now seeing is his competitive fire to take on the best challenges, to take on the best guys and use his length and now his physicality on the defensive end to really kind of impose his will on that end. And we saw that with the way he handled Kevin Durant, who I think was surprised as anyone with how physical JT played him.
No, this playoffs was a coming out party for Tatum. And even though the votes and everything for all NBA was done at the end of the season, but these playoffs justified that first team all NBA.
Oh, 100%.
Like that's the most prestigious thing you can do. That's all that makes you top five. Top five. Yeah. What? You're just top five. Like you're there. You're the elite of the elite. So that was the coming out party, man.
Yeah. And then obviously going into the next series, with that was just a 7-game meat grinder. Just punishing, physically taxing for everybody. Like that was the series where Grant Williams showed how valuable he was at both ends. And obviously that clinching game was just a tour de force, but he was just putting defensive clinics on that and during that entire series. He made himself some good money when his time comes. I'm not sure what he's going to get or who's going to be his salary comparison. A lot of people talk about Tucker being a salary comparison, but
460 kind of guy, but it could be even more. I mean, if Fournier is 480, I mean, Grant's better than Fournier, but man, I don't know. It's going to get high. Like I was comparing it to Shamet, who Phoenix gave like 454, and he's much better than that. So I don't know. Are we going to get a little hometown discount? Maybe 4 or 5 for 70, 75, somewhere in that range.
Maybe.
It's going to be interesting. You got to pay it though. There's no question. You pay back. Bruce Wayne.
You could tell that Milwaukee, and they commentators on TNT on I forget if it was TNT or ABC, but I think it was some on TNT, but they made the commentary and even on ESPN that no longer having Tucker coming off the bench from Milwaukee was a big thing that they missed. And because with Lopez and Giannis, they, of course, tended to stay closer to the rim and guard the rim, as is Budenholzer's system. His goal is he's going to give up threes, but he wants to guard the rim. But last year, the element of having Tucker allowed him to still be big and have a guy with the size who could still come out and move his feet on the perimeter a little bit. They chose not to pay him this last offseason. He went to Miami, and obviously Miami really benefited from having him.
No, he's a monster, man. He gave us some fits too. And it was because they thought they replaced him with Ibaka, And we saw Ibaka for what, 3 minutes in that series? Like, talk
Right.
about just done. Send him to the old folks home. I couldn't believe that he couldn't even see the court. That's how done he is. That Ibaka was a player, man.
Yeah. I was really surprised after the offseason move. They did not go to him at all in that series.
And Coach Bud just made no adjustments. Like, he was going to die by the three. If Grant Williams and Pritchard and all these guys are going to hit threes, we're going to lose. He did not up. And it's like, you're going to dare us to do that at home in a game 7? Thank you.
Well, I mean, I get the logic behind it. I mean, in theory, I'm going to say, I've got the best player in the league.
Yep.
No team is going to beat us 4 times out of 7 shooting like that. Like,
It's true.
We're going to get out there. Now, obviously, they were missing some offense. And so half-court creation for them at times was a little bit difficult. When you're missing an all-star and Chris Middleton, that happens. That's his system. Regardless of whether Middleton is there, they're going to give up that shot. That is specifically what they're going to do. They're going to give up that shot, and Grant, give all the credit to Grant, and all the players moving and just really gutting out that series and surviving. So that was just, when we saw that, you saw Grant make that, and then after we won in Game 7, such a grueling series, I honestly thought things would lighten up when we got to Miami. Like, I really thought, like, oh man, after that meat grinder, playing Miami should be much easier. They're less physical. We should be able to push them around, bully them around a little bit. Like, things should be much easier. Like, I have us in maybe 6 or whatever, but things should be a bit easier. What did I get wrong? What happened?
It wasn't your fault. I mean, you can't go from playing a Game 7 to a Game 1 in just 2-3 days. And then we had no Al. We had no Smart. I mean, it was such a, everything was stacked up against us in that Game 1. Obviously, we lose that. And then every other game, it was like, is Smart playing? Is Rob playing? Who's playing? What do we got? I mean, it was just a crap show. But credit to Miami. They took advantage. They didn't have their full team either. But I just really hate the narrative that Miami was hurt. Like, we have Rob Williams running around on one leg out there. Like, what do you mean?
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because there is still this undercurrent of that. We've taken the most difficult run to get to where we are. But I know last year, Phoenix, another way that our story sometimes parallels Phoenix, last year, there's a lot of argument that Phoenix benefited from some injuries on other teams to get to where they were in the finals, that they benefited from catching teams at fortunate times where they did not have their best player. Obviously, Miami was banged up. Milwaukee didn't have Middleton. I guess if you're wanting to continue the same narrative, I suppose you can say Simmons never suited up, and if he had played, maybe things would be different. What do you say to people who come with that angle, Billy?
Have you watched the NBA in the last 75 years? It's every year. Literally every year. Last year, the Bucks win, not only because Kevin Durant has a size half too big of a shoe, but because they had injuries that year. The Bucks weren't, the Nets weren't 100% healthy, like always. But think about the Heat's path to get there. They got Embiid with a broken face. They had a Toronto team who I had no idea who was playing every other night. Van Fleet was in, then he was out. OG was in, then he was out. Scotty Barnes was hurt. what are we talking about here? That's the NBA playoffs. Every year, if you really want to go down this path, which I don't recommend, but people want to do it, you could put an asterisk on every title. You want to put an asterisk on Kawhi's title? Because Golden State was injured in that finals. So, like, what are we doing here?
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's the NBA season is what it is because it is a war of attrition. By the time you get to the finals, everybody's banged up. Everybody's hurt. Everybody's dealing with something lingering. And along the way, that's what it is. It's as much about talent as it is about will. And you say this all the time, but there are no style points in the playoffs. It does not matter if you win pretty or if you win ugly, if you win by 25 or if you win by 2. None of that matters. All that matters is score more points than the other team. That's it. Because all that matters is the scoreboard. Nobody can take that away. And so if you're there, you're playing. If you're able to play, that's it. And if you're not, that's fine. But the narrative that players are catching breaks or anything like that is just it's out and out lunacy. Like nobody's getting off easy at this point. Nobody's getting off easy. Miami was not the physical opponent that Milwaukee was, but they were mentally taxing in a different way. Just in
Jimmy
terms
Butler,
of, and God, man, if you're not sure about who Jimmy Butler is, man, that's all you got to do is just watch this. Man, that guy is a dog. Man, he is a baller, and he just plays his heart out, and just one of the underrated. His numbers aren't sexy during the regular season, and that's just because of how that team plays. But when the lights are bright, man, you just that's a guy you want in your foxhole, man. I just can't say enough about who Jimmy is. And I still always go back to, the choice that Philly had to make in choosing to keep Tobias Harris versus him, which I think is what it came down to, or keeping, or just deciding that Jimmy was going to, I don't know if they thought Jimmy was going to butt heads with Embiid as a leader. And so they say, no, we're going to let him go because Embiid's going to be the unquestioned leader over this team and not Jimmy. I'm not sure exactly what the politics were for that at that time, but I just remember thinking they might regret this. They might regret signing Harris.
They thought that, hey, we can sign Tobias to his max, and then we can get bargain bin Jimmy Butler. We can just get Horford and Richardson for almost half the price of what we would be paying Jimmy. Mm-hmm. And it turned out to be a huge mistake because neither of those guys are playing for the Sixers, and they were there.
Yeah, and that's a team that, and not to get on to them too much, but that's a team that I feel like is, and that it maybe needs more leadership.
Yeah,
because I don't know what Harden has left to give at that area. I don't know that he was ever a great leader. I don't know how much he has left. I had Embiid as my MVP this year. Um, I I get the argument with Jokic and his numbers. I just thought with what Embiid did for a team that was really under the spotlight because of the Ben Simmons thing all year. I thought he was consistent and he was reliable for that team. I had him as my MVP. That said, when it comes down to the playoffs, I just don't. He needs someone else to help him break through, and I don't know. We could fill a whole pod with stuff about Doc Rivers, which I don't want to. But,
Yeah.
but I feel like if we're talking about Embiid, Harden, and Doc Rivers, I feel like these are three guys that probably deserve each other in some way.
And they had Udoka on that bench, and they just didn't even see what they had.
Yeah.
Udoka's on the bench, and you don't even see like what you have right there. The Nets did the same thing. I mean, this guy's just sitting on your bench, and you don't utilize him. It's crazy. It's such a great story.
Imagine if Philly had made the Sacramento trade instead. What were they offering? Harrison Barnes and probably what's the kid's name? Who's now
Halliburton. He's phenomenal.
Yeah. Imagine if that was the trade they had made. Simmons for Barnes and Halliburton.
Or even just do the CJ McCollum trade. Look how much he boosted that Pelicans team. That was nothing.
I in a way, I'm kind of thankful Philly is Philly.
Yep.
Their team could be so scary if they just made a few different moves. But anyway, so we've been on here for a while. Like as I said, today, I don't want to get too far into discussing our next opponent in the finals, our search for Banner 18. I'm going to save that for our next pod. See if we can do that on Wednesday. But it's great to be back, and we're going to try and do this to finish out the end of this year. If you watch this or listen to this, thank you for coming back and listening and being a part. We're so sorry. I'm so sorry that we left. We didn't get a chance to do this the way we wanted to the entire year and be with you in that way. Though, if you were a part of the Reds Disciples Facebook community, you saw us there frequently, regularly. And if you have not joined, please feel free to join and join our discussion. It is a Celtics family in there. And there's always room for one more. But with that, anything else that you want to share about this improbable run that will continue on starting Thursday?
I mean, it's been the ultimate. We call it the roller coaster, but it's an emotional roller coaster to the finals. I mean, we did it. We got over the hump, the ups, the downs, the loop-de-loops. We thought we were going backwards sometimes, but the roller coaster, man, it went to the finals.
Right. Oh, so, and I'm glad you said that. At one point I had changed the name of the Facebook community to Red's Roller Coaster of Immense Sadness. That had been earlier during the year when we were just dropping games left and right and losing the lead. And I just remember thinking at that time, that like I felt sick, especially after that New York game. I forget when I did it, but it felt like it was sometime around that time. And it just, to me, it made sense. This is like, we're up, we're down. Like, this team should be so much better. And it was just, it was hilariously awful at times. You just had, everyone was hate watching this team. You didn't watch games. You survived those games. Sometimes with your wits barely intact. Now at this point, with that we've changed things around, I probably will change the name back maybe after the season goes. After the season,
don't jinx it. We can't have any jinxes here. It's worked so far.
Right. So we'll keep it as going. For a brief second, when we were celebrating, I flipped it for a second, and I wasn't going to keep it there, but someone was like, change it back. And so I was like, all right, I was going to do it anyway, but I just wanted to say, like, this has been an improbable run to the finals. I know I was supposed to ask you, Billy, last time we talked, you were headed to a game on the West Coast, since I know you're a West Coast guy. Before we get out of here, what happened? What do you remember about that trip?
It was the most depressing trip I've ever had. 3 games in 4 nights. And it was 2 in LA and 1 in Phoenix. And I don't know if you remember, the Clippers game was especially just pathetic because that was the BJ Boston game.
Oh, yeah. That kid had like 19 in the first half. It was raining threes.
Yep. So pretty much everybody we played had like some kind of major injury. There's no Paul George. There's obviously no Kawhi. And we just got beat by like third stringers. And I'm just sitting there, head in hands. At least at the Laker game, you see Ben Affleck and J-Lo. So that's fun. But oh my God, just hell. Just the road trip from hell. That's what I'll remember.
And to go all the way from the road trip from hell to, now, like, I don't know, just the path towards heaven, I guess. There's no other, I can't think of any other way to put it. The promised land. Thank you. Pathway to the promised land now. The energy has shifted.
Yes. Jaylen Brown said it best.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all right. That's it for now. Again, disciples, thank you so much for listening, for being a part of this. If you're listening to this, if you're watching this, you are family. You are disciples. Join us. Feel free to comment. Share us your thoughts. And on Wednesday, we will do a preview specifically for this next series, which will be against the Golden State Warriors. We'll break down a little bit of what we expect, maybe do some predictions, and just get into this a little bit deeper. All right, but we look forward to seeing you then. So I'm Billy, he's Aaron, or something like that. And we will see you soon. Okay.
Like we never.
We are clear.
Nice.
All right. So thank you. Thank you for that. It's good.
That was a lot of fun, man.
That was a lot of fun.
Just like old times.
I miss this. Miss this, man. It's like we just jump right back in.
Exactly.
Just like it's like nothing's changed. That's the way I like it.
That's the way it should be, man. Celtics
That's the way it should
basketball
be.
brings everyone together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, all right. I'm going to go ahead and compile this together, and um, I'll throw it up on Anchor in the usual spots.
Love it.
But I will talk to you soon, and yeah, we'll get this going.
Back in business.
Yes,
talk to you
sir.
later.
A good one.